the basic story, okay, just to make sure that everyone's familiar with it, also people that are online, and that they're familiar with the story, and then we'll get a bit more in depth, and there's a lot of very different ways you can go with the story of Purim, so it depends on what you want to discuss. So in the time of Achashverosh, he's the king. We know very, very little about him from the introduction. We have a lot from the Midrashim that tell us stories about who he is, or rather the lack of who he is. He is a very careless king. His big decree is everybody do what you want, right? Like eating, drinking with no limitations. He doesn't have any very strong opinions about things. Kind of tyrannical in the way of there not being any boundaries to anything. And this, we see him being taken advantage by everyone, right, left, and center. And then he decides to have a big party after he's been ruling for 3 years. He's been ruling. He decides to have a very big festival. He has a party for 180 days. These 180 days, the party that goes on is for all the important people, and then the last 7 days are for all of the people that live in Shushan. That's how the story starts. It goes from there to the fact that seemingly he's bored, and he decides that he wants Vashti to show up. So he commands her to show up. Vashti doesn't show up, and there's only a handful of people who actually know about the fact that Vashti does not show up, else to show up. So who is the story? Who is Vashti? Vashti is the princess. She's the daughter of the king, and she falls in love with Achashverosh, who tends to the horses. He is not from royalty. He is not he doesn't come from anything, but rather he's a simple man who works in the palace, and she falls in love with him. Once she falls in love with him, she marries him. Her father dies, and he becomes king by default. Because he becomes king by default, she never actually treats him as king. He, who does not know how to use power, abuses it, and we end up seeing it in the results of the first chapter. The first chapter is sort of an introduction without it actually having to do with the story of Purim at all, right? The entire story of Purim is our story of anti-Semitism, persecution, right? Esther, Mordechai, perhaps, but none of this is actually happening in the first chapter. The first chapter is more setting the scene. Who's at this party? What's going on over there? Megillaht tells the king, says, listen, because Vashti is not willing to listen to what you're saying, she is going to, what's going to happen is now everything is going to change in the kingdom, and no one's going to listen to you as a king. No one's, wives aren't going to listen to their husbands. We're going to have complete chaos, and here's what we need to do: find someone else to replace Vashti. The king does that, and that is the end of chapter 1. Is Vashti is removed. We don't know actually what happens to her, and then the king is sad. He's sad that he lost his wife, that he lost his queen, and now they need to go out in search of a new wife. And
why is Megillaht why does it have this paragraph here? Like, you know how in the Megillah it doesn't have the.
Where are you looking?
It says Mem Vav Mem.
Oh, you're asking about the where it says Masara over there?
Yeah.
Okay,
and
so.
it says Mumchen, and it says read it as Megillaht.
Right. So there's, when in the Torah and Megillahs and everything, you have Kri and Chtiv. You have ways that it was written by tradition and ways that are pronounced. So whether this was the Persian way of pronunciation, and then we changed it later on, or this is by tradition. So in the Gemara, it refers to him as Mimmuchan, as opposed to Mumchan, Okay, now Mimuchan comes from the word, hey, welcome back. Okay, Mimuchan comes from the word, there's Megillahs back there. So Mimuchan comes from the word Muchan, right? Prepared. Things are ready. So in a way, one of the things that we see is he is preparing a certain narrative that we're going to see throughout the whole thing. And if we don't know anything about him, then we just know he's one of the king's senior officers. We don't know anything else about him. Later on, we hear about Haman, and the Gemara makes this assumption of Haman and Memuchan are the same person. And we know this because Memuchan means he is prepared, and he is preparing this path for himself. Okay? So, very much the Gemara and in general and throughout Tanakh, we have names that depict not actually like the person, it's not the actual person's given name, right? But rather the person, it rather is telling us who that person is or what happens to them. So for example, Megillaht Ruth is the best example. You have Arpa, right? That she turns her orif, she turns her back, her neck, right? Her parents didn't name her Arpa. Machlon and Kilyon, that he dies from a machala and he's Kaleh.
You just give them
right?
new names.
Right, I'm saying, but like that was clearly not what their parents named them, right? But we refer to them as a sweet because this is what we learned from them. So Memuchan is like that. Okay? So second chapter is telling us the beginning is the king is now he's calmed down. Okay, he's a drunk and he's not a good drunk at this, and he now calms down. The party's over, and his wife's gone, and he's sad. So, why is he sad? Because they had a relationship and he loved her, or she was the power of the kingdom, and he doesn't actually know how to rule a kingdom because he's not meant to be king. So he is now in search for a new wife, and there is they send out to all of the women all over the kingdoms, all over to look for young virgins who are beautiful, who will be brought to Achashverosh, and they will be given whatever they need. Suddenly there's a cameo, right? Suddenly there's out of nowhere, there's Ish Yehudi, there's a Jewish man, okay, Haya b'Shushana bira, ushma Mordechai ben Yair ben Shim'i ben Kish ish Yemini. So actually these names we have beforehand. We have previously in Tanakh Kish, and we have Shim'i, and we have Yair. Mordechai is a new name. So this is actually something that we see a lot in the diaspora, which is in the beginning, when Jews escaped Germany and they came to America, they named their children Avraham and Shmuel and Yitzchak, and they named their children Jewish names. And then afterwards, they lost that, and it became very, very secular, right? And we see this that Mordechai, where's this name come from? Morduch, a Persian god. Okay, so his name is not a Jewish name. Okay, so and even Ester is a Jewish. That we have Ester and Hadassah, and there's also speculations that her names are not even. Their source of them is not a Jewish name, which means they're kind of assimilating into this culture. It very much depends again on how you're reading it, and because we're not going to be doing this over a series of classes, but we'll try to cram it in tonight in an hour, the story of the Megillah, right? So when we're looking at the story of the Megillah, most people look at it and say, Mordechai comes and he stands up, and he's the rabbi that gets up and he stands up against all of this. He's standing up against Haman, he's standing up against Achashverosh, he's angry at the elders of the generation, he's going to fight everybody, right? But his name is Mordechai. His name is from an idol, from a place of idol worshiping, right? Did he have a place of assimilation? He also we refer to him a few times that he's wearing these clothes, the Persian clothes, right? And we have kind of trouble with this as well. And people miss these nuances because while we're reading about Mordechai, who's this great leader, we're kind of missing that there's a whole bunch of things that are happening. So he's Ish Yemini, okay? He's from the tribe of Binyamin. And he is Asher Huglam Yerushalayim. He was exiled from Yerushalayim with the kingdom of Yehuda by Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babel. So that is his real name. His real name was Mordechai. Okay? It's not that he had another name that we know of. Okay? But it just shows you, like, there's the first generation is like very idealistic, we'll keep the names with us. Slowly, right, you lose it. You lose that strength of the names, right? And it's a problem, right? Now, it happens to be that when we refer to Mordechai, we talk about him as the head of the Sanhedrin and a great rabbi and an amazing person, okay? But he also, right, is in this this stage of the assimilation. Okay, so he is fostering. It's Avital's phone. Agri's trying to get through there. Here, you just mute it. So he is fostering Hadassah. Okay, her name is Ester, so she has two names. Okay, and there is a here Ester. It's Ishtar, as beautiful as the moon. That's what the Gemara refers to. Right. So it's not a Jewish name.
Yeah.
Right. It comes. So the Gemara refers to it as here. Even Esther's name, it comes from Ishtar, which is the female goddess of the moon. Right. Not a Jewish name. So there is this assimilation process, but she's also known as Hadassah. She also has this part. Now, she has no father or mother. Okay, they died, and Mordechai adopts her, raises her as his own. Question as what this means. Agri was calling you and looking for you. He's in the kitchen. So Mordechai takes her as his daughter, and he's raising her as his own. One day, the king's guards are coming through, and they're collecting all the girls, and she is taken with them. Mordechai tells her, "Do not tell people who you are, where you're from. Right? Do not say that you are Jewish, that you're an Israelite. Right? Like, do not say any of this. Keep it to yourself." Now, there's also when Achashverosh actually picks her, it repeats it. She does not tell him where she's from, and maybe that's also what he's looking for. He's looking for someone who's coming from nothing, as opposed to Vashti, who is a tyrannical power above him because she's royalty and he's not. So there's also some stuff to look in over there, and all of the girls come, and they get 6 months in the besamim, in all of these cosmetics, perfumes, and 6 months in the oil of myrrh, which turns your skin slightly green. So Esther was slightly green by the time she got to Achashverosh. Turns out he liked green women. That's like the only thing that we actually know about his taste. And then every girl who comes to Achashverosh can ask for anything, any jewelry, any dress, whatever she wants to make herself beautiful. Esther does not want this, right? She does not want to draw any attention. She would like to go back home. But this simplistic aspect of her is nesiat chen. Okay? It says, Vatisachen v'chesed lefanav. Okay? She has chen. The other person who it refers to that has chen is earlier in the Tanakh in Bereshit, who has chen. It's a man. Only one other person is referred to as noseh chen. It's like a specific kind of attribute. It's Yosef. Yosef is the only other person who has this chen that people are just like drawn to in a completely different way. So there's a lot of like parallels between Esther and Yosef in their beauty and their simplisticness, right? And Achashverosh loves her, takes her as a queen, and they're gonna celebrate. Mordechai Yoshev b'Shar HaMelech. Now, this fact that it repeats this, it mentions it in a few places that Mordechai is sitting in Shar HaMelech. The people who are sitting at the gate of the king are important people. It's not beggars. Okay, that's an important fact. Like when we read about Lot, okay, Lot is sitting in the entrance of the city. What does that mean? That means he's a judge. Okay, like the people who are sitting in the entrance of the city or in the entrance, like at the gate, these are people of status. So Mordechai is sitting in Shar HaMelech, and he wants to see what is happening with Esther. He's keeping tabs on her, and then when this happens, he happens to overhear two of the king's guard that decide that they would like to poison the king. He tells this to Esther. Esther tells it to the king. They find it. They kill them, and this will be remembered for them as a good thing for later on. That is how this ends. Right after this, Perek Gimel. Yeah.
Was Mordecai a beggar or was he a rabbi?
So he's not a beggar. He is an important person by our standards, and sounds like from the Megillah, it sounds like by their standard, by the Persian standards as well. Okay, so when anyone who sits in the entrance of the city or in the entrance of the gate is an important person. Beggars aren't allowed to show up at the entrance of the castle. Okay, we find that out later on when it says that when he's wearing rags. It says he's being removed from there because you're not allowed to show up there like that. Right? The only people who are allowed to stand at the gate are important people. So Mordechai is over there, whether he's a judge, he's an officer, he's something, he has some role. Also, from everything that we know, we know that Jewish leaders in the diaspora underneath foreign rule, often, the big rabbis often had some sort of connection with the king. Okay, king or government or whatever it was, to have good diplomatic relationships. He is the head of the Sanhedrin. He had some sort of relationship with Achashverosh. So he's at the gate. That's what we know, right? And he overhears that these two guards are planning on poisoning the king. The Midrash says they are speaking the language because one of the things that Achashverosh does is he wants to show everybody, look how liberal I am. Look how look how accepting and right, like, of everybody I am. I'm gonna have my guards from all over the place. So he brings in his guards. His guards are from different places. Bigtan and Teresh are two of these guards. They're speaking a language that is not Persian, and they assume no one can understand them. And they talk about killing the king. So when they talk about killing the king, Mordechai overhears them. And how does he overhear them? Because all of the Sanhedrin knew how to speak 70 languages. Therefore, he knew what they were saying, and they didn't suspect him. That is the Midrash. So then Mordechai sends a message to Esther. Esther says, in the name of Mordechai. Now, why is this important that it's in the name of Mordechai? Because we say, Ha'omer davar b'shem omro mavi geula la'olam. We learn it from here. If you say something in the name of someone else, you bring redemption to the world. The world needs to be redeemed. How do we do it? By not taking credit for things that aren't ours, right? You hear something in the name of someone else, that's how you save people. Eventually, the whole story of the Megillah ends up happening because Mordechai gets the reward that he needs to get because Esther said it in the name of Mordechai. Esther could have just said, I have heard, right? No one would have checked her credibility. She's the queen, right? It would have given her more favor with the king if she would have just said, here. But she says, this man Mordechai, right? Doesn't say who he is, just says, V'tomer Ester lamelech b'shem Mordechai. Esther says it in the name of Mordechai, right? And then because of this brings the Geula. This is what ends up redeeming. Okay? And that's how the second chapter ends. The third chapter starts with something completely non-related, with a character we haven't heard yet, right? We haven't heard anything about. After these things happened, after his life was saved by Mordechai, what ends up happening? The king decides to take Haman and promote him above all the other officers. Right? There is suddenly a change over here, and we know nothing about Haman up until now. He's not mentioned, right? He's not a character we concern ourselves with.
Where are we?
Perek Gimel.
Gimel?
Yeah, 14. Okay, so at this point, right, like we know nothing about Haman, and suddenly the king takes him after what's happening? After he's being, after Mordechai. Where's everything coming in from?
Are there a bunch?
Yeah, there's like a few bees over here. There's, I don't know, something big just flew in. So we have after these things that happen, that Mordechai saves the king promotes Haman, right? So we don't know who Haman is. We don't know anything about him, but if we listen to the Gemara and say, the Gemara says that there's an agenda of something that's happening behind the scenes, then we understand Haman has some sort of role over here. And then everybody needs to bow down to Haman. Why does the king care who they bow down to? Right? The king doesn't even care if they bow down to him. Right? The king doesn't value himself so much to expect people to bow down to him. People bow down to the king. Why have people bow down to an officer? Right? What is the incentive over here to have them bow down to Haman? There's something going on over here. Mordechai refuses to bow down. Now, the whole story of Purim, in a way, started in chapter 2, right? Perek Bet, when we have Mordechai, Esther coming into the story. Now we have Haman. We have like some sort of wickedness that's coming in, and we hear that he is Haman ben Hamadata Ha'agagi. He is a descendant of Agag that we read this past Shabbat. That Agag is the king of Amalek. So we know that there's something very, very wicked and evil over here, rooted in, and that's why we're being told about him in this kind of way. The Gemara asks, why did Bnei Israel get punished that Haman is after us? Right? All in all, we're going to read, it's over here, it's the next thing is, Mordechai refuses to bow down, and we know that he's Jewish, right? It says because he told them he's Jewish and he won't bow down, and Haman says, okay, I'm going to kill all the Jews. Why are we being punished for Mordechai's actions? That it's all of this like craziness. There's two options that are brought up in the Gemara. One is that we are being punished because we participated in the meal of Achashverosh. It actually doesn't say that we participated in the meal of Achashverosh, right? If you look through the psukim, it just says there's a big meal, everyone's welcome, and there's the last 7 days only the Jews of Shushan. So why is everybody being punished? Like, why all the Jews of the world? Why not just the Jews of Shushan? Okay? And it doesn't even say that they participated in the meal, right? That's the first opinion. The second opinion is that they bow down to a statue. And the Midrash says that Haman made a statue of himself that he wore as a necklace and made everybody bow down to him as well, and therefore Mordechai refused to bow down. Right, so there's these two different opinions, but those are the reasons the Gemara brings in. Now, both of these things, are they a big enough reason to destroy the nation? Are they a great enough reason to say Am Yisrael deserves to be wiped out? Are these the biggest crimes that we've committed? So if you look at the back in chapter 1,
What are you looking for?
Pasuk Zayin. Okay, so it says V'hashkot b'klei zahav v'kelim mekelim shonim. So the tune for kelim mekelim shonim changes to the tune of Eicha, right? V'kelim mekelim shonim. So as soon as you change it to that, you realize there's something weird that's going on, and one of the reasons for it is there's an assumption that that Achashverosh is using all of the kelim from the Mikdash, right? He's lighting the menorah for light. He's using the machtot for the altar. He's using them to serve people, right? It's like it's to show. Huh?
And he's wearing shatnez.
And he's wearing the Bigdei Kohen Gadol, which is shatnez. Okay,
And how does all that get to Iran?
that's where. How does it go?
How does it get to
We
Iran?
were. That's where we were
Because
exiled.
They conquered it.
The first the big exile
from the
were,
first.
right. So Daryavesh were there's Nebuchadnezzar, Daryavesh, Achashverosh. Okay. So with Daryavesh, right? So Nebuchadnezzar comes and he takes the things from Beit HaMikdash. And then Daryavesh is a king in and of himself. He doesn't need to show off everything he has. Achashverosh is a king because he married the queen. So he's showing off everything he has, right? This is like, this is someone with no self-esteem that comes and is making noise, right? They're coming and making noise because they have no self-esteem. They don't have a right to why they're there, right? Achashverosh is trying to prove that he has the right to why he's here, so he's making a lot of noise. How do you make a lot of noise if you're a king? You either go to war or you show off everything, right? So he's showing off. He's showing off all the gold. And then he says, hey, you know what? Let me show you off my wife, right? It was all just, he needs to show, I have power, I am king, right? But if you need to keep on repeating, I am king, maybe you're not king, right?
It's just, did they retain the spirituality? Are they holy?
So we do repurify them when we go back to Israel. There's a lot of questions about Klei HaMikdash, which ones come back to Israel, which ones are in Beit Rishon but not in Beit Sheni. What happens to them? Where do they disappear to? When the Greeks use them, we repurify them, right? So there is a process that they go through. Okay, so Haman comes and he decides he's going to erase all of the Jews, and he wants to do something that is completely random. What does he do? Hepil pu. He drew a lottery. So there's different ways of doing it. Roll a dice, throw darts, pick two numbers out of a hat. It does not matter. He wants to show the Jews' lives are in my hands and it's completely random. Now, why would he do it in that kind of way? Any ideas of why not just say, I'm killing all the Jews tomorrow? Or saying, in exactly a year from now? Why go with random?
Psychological warfare, I guess.
Psychological warfare.
Yeah.
What do you think?
It's kind of like shedding responsibility for it in a sense.
Shedding responsibility. Any ideas?
Instilling fear.
Yeah, warfare, right? Like the psychological warfare, right? So these are great answers, but what are we forgetting about Haman? Who is he? He is from Amalek. Okay, the basis of Amalek is they don't believe in free will. They believe that everything is predetermined. Okay? Which means, why is Amalek attacking us? What we read in Parashat Zachar. Amalek's attacking us because it's predetermined. Okay? There is no free will. Everything has already happened. And therefore, mikre, things happen. I can go, I can steal, I can rape, I can murder, I can do whatever I want. Because it's not my fault. I have no responsibility. The shedding of responsibility is a really important idea because it means it's already determined. And we're saying, no, there is a guidance. Okay, there is a guiding hand in the world. Hashem decides what's going to happen, and we have free will. And Amalek says it's either this or that. Either God decides what happens, or you have free will. So Haman says, I'm going to kill you randomly. I'm going to pick a date, okay? That date, that's when you're going to die. I'm showing you that your fate is predetermined. And he goes to Achashverosh, and he says, I want to kill all the Jews. No one seems to have a problem with this. There's a massive party of all of the important people from all around the world show up, and they all get together. They're all celebrating for half a year of a party together. And then Haman gets up and says, okay, I want to kill all the Jews. No one has a problem with it. Not a single country in the world, right? You don't hear that there's any opposition of why kill all the Jews because of one person, right? Where does this come from? This is the anti-Semitic roots that exist in the world, and they exist in every generation, right? The world does not shed extra tears when Jews are killed, right? We just talked about this in the last Shabbat, which was the world makes so much noise about everything that happens Israel-related. Yet the world did not make any noise with what just happened in the past week in Syria, because Syrians were killing Syrians and no one cared about it. There was a guy who got up in the UN the other week, a guy from Yemen, who got up, and it was great. He says, it seems like you guys just really only care about the Jews, because where's everybody's Yemenite flag? He says, do you know how many people have been killed in Yemen? Do you know how many people have been killed in Sudan? Where are all those flags? Why is no one waving them? Right? So it's like clearly only when Jews are involved do people care, right? But over here it's like, okay, we'll just kill the Jews. No one seems to it doesn't seem to bother. And the king says, you know what, even more than that, shedding responsibility. Here's my ring. Whatever you want to write, you can do, and we will make it happen. And right afterwards, complete disconnection from like emotion. The king, right, like everybody's all of the Jews in Shushan are crying, and the king and Haman are sitting down to drink. That is the end of chapter 3, right? The end of chapter 3 is there's no one cares, and the Jews are sad, right? And Haman and Achashverosh sit down to drink. Perek Daled, Mordechai hears all of these things, and he goes and he changes his clothes from his Persian royalty clothes to sak ve'efer. Here is where we actually see an interesting dynamic between Mordechai and Esther. Mordechai goes and he sits down again in front of the palace, yet again, but now he's wearing rags. And Esther sees this, and it says, Vatichalchal hamalka meod. 2 places is Esther referred to as the queen as opposed to Esther. Here is one of them. In other words, the royalty gets to her head. Esther is looking and says, okay, I understand you're sad, but you still need to dress properly. You can't show up to the palace in rags. If you're going to show up to the palace, show up in proper attire. Wear your suit and tie, right? You can't show up here however you like. You can't make a protest in front of the palace, right? And this is one of two places. The other place that it refers to is Achashverosh refers to her as the queen, right? But besides that, she always is referred to as Esther or Ester HaMalka. But over here, V'tichalchal HaMalka meod. And she says, go change. Here are proper clothes to wear. Don't wear what these rags. And he tells her what happens, and there's a back and forth. And he tells her, he says, you need to go to talk to the king. Okay? And this is a very, very key moment in their relationship. Is Mordechai tells her, you need to go and talk to the king. And she says, I can't. I haven't communicated with the king. I haven't been to see the king for 30 days. And everybody knows if you haven't seen the king in 30 days, he doesn't want to see you. And if you walk in without permission, you get executed. Okay, the Midrash says that he had soldiers with bows and arrows that are in the courtyard. And when someone would walk in, they draw their bows, right? And only if the king takes his staff and hands it, right, and the person touches it, then they're safe. Otherwise, they get executed on the spot, right? They get shot down. So Esther says, I can't do it. And here is, in my opinion, one of the most important psukim in all of the Megillah, is on page 18. Vayomer Mordechai lashiv el Ester. Mordechai tells to return this message to Esther. Al tidmi benafshech lihimalet beit hamelech mikol haYehudim. Do not imagine that you will be safe while all the other Jews are executed if you're in the palace. Ki im hacharesh tacharishi. Because if you will keep silent be'et hazot, in this moment, revach v'hatzala ya'amod laYehudim mimakom acher, God will save us, right? The redemption will come from somewhere else. It's very, very clear. There will be redemption. We will be redeemed. Ve'at uvetavich tovedu. And you and your whole lineage will disappear, right? You won't be remembered. Umi yodea im la'et kazot hegat lamalchut. And who knows if this is the entire reason you became queen. Now, here's the thing. There is so much Torah that you can talk about in this one pasuk of umi yodea, and who knows if the entire reason that you are here is for that you're here is for this one particular moment, right? We don't know why we are in certain positions, right? We don't know why we've gone through things, good or bad. But maybe everything we've been through is for this exact moment. And if you live your life in this kind of mentality of maybe, just maybe, everything I've been through, right? Doesn't matter what it is. Everything you've been through. That is what brought you to here. That's an unbelievable thing. Okay? So hold that in your head. I want to finish the Megillah and come back to, we'll put a pin in it and come back to it with understanding Purim and the Megillah. And Esther says, okay, you go and fast, okay? And have all the Jews fast, right? All the Jews fast, you fast, I'll fast, my handmaidens, they'll all fast. But the word over here is lech knos. Go bring all of the Jews together. The big part of what Haman tells Achashverosh, why can we kill the Jews? Well, because they're scattered. When they're united, we can't handle them. This is what we talked about 2 weeks ago on Shkalim, right? Is each one comes and gives their contribution. It all is going back and connecting together. Because by ourselves, right, we're very, very fragile. In Parashat Nitzavim, there's a midrash that says of a father who calls his children in and he on his deathbed, and he tells them, he says, I have something over here to tell you, my eulogy, my like, how do you say, like, my spiritual inheritance,
Legacy?
right? Like, no, it's like what I want to teach you. How do you say, like,
Legacy?
no, I'm blanking on the word. There's another word for it. Whatever, it'll come to me. So he says, I want you all to come together, and he hands them a thing of twigs, right? A bundle of twigs, and he says, I want you to come and break them. Right? And the first one comes and he tries to break the twigs and he can't. And the second one comes and he tries to break it and he can't. And he goes through all the kids. And the father says, here, give them back to me. And he gives it back to them and he unties it and he breaks them one at a time. Right? And he says, when you're united, nothing can break you. But when you are separated, anyone, even a dying man, can break you off one at a time. Right? Be united. So lech knosat kol haYehudim, go take all of the Jews, right? Get them all together. That is the solution for all of the suffering that we're going through in the story. Is lech knos, bring everybody together. And then Esther goes and she wears royal clothes. She goes to the king. The king puts out his staff and it reaches out. It does, and actually, whenever it says Hamelech and not Hamelech Achashverosh, it's always referring to Hashem. So the Midrash over here also continues and says that he didn't want to, but then Hamelech, God, makes the staff extend to her at the entrance, and she touches it, right? And then she goes in, and he asks, what do you want? What can I do for you? Ad chatzia malchut. Whatever you want, half the kingdom I'll give to you. And she says, I want you and Haman to come with me I'm having a feast. Now this is very normal, right? If you're having like a big business meeting, you don't have it over the phone. If you have a big favor to ask, you say, come, we'll sit down. I'll butter you up. I'll bring you to a nice restaurant. We'll sit, we'll talk, right? And then we'll close the deal. And then what happens at the meal?
It stabs you back.
Well, at the meal, she says, come back again tomorrow, right? Like, come back again tomorrow, right? So like, she's not able to ask at the first one. She's like, let's do it again. Now, there's a very interesting opinion about everything that happens over here, which is Esther goes with a suicide mission, right? She decides, I'm going to take Haman down with me. The king has been very jealous. The king has this mindset. How about I bring Haman down? And we'll see it throughout the Megillah from this point on, where basically Esther is setting up Haman to seem like an affair, so that they will be executed together and all of this gets foiled. Because she doesn't have another plan of the king getting rid of Haman. The only way the king will get rid of Haman is if she jumps on the grenade. So she's trying to make that plan. That is one opinion of what this is happening. So the first mishteh, he asks her, what do you want? And she says, come back the next day, and I'll have another meal. Haman leaves happy. And he has everything in the world. He has a beautiful wife, 11 miserable children, right? And what more can you want? He's the highest ranking officer. Everybody's bowing down to him. And he leaves there and Mordechai won't bow down to him, right? So you've got everything in the world and you're still a miserable human being. Mordechai leaves after he was the only person invited to this exclusive meeting with the king. And he is the only person invited again tomorrow to this exclusive meeting with the king. What does he do? He goes back to his wife and he says, I can't stand it. I'm so happy. Then I see Mordechai and I just lose it completely. What should I do? Zeresh tells him, she says, here's what you should do. Go build a gallows, okay, a big tall tree. We can hang Mordechai on it. Tomorrow. Terrific, right? He's so happy, does it right away, and he doesn't wait 30 seconds. He goes into the palace to wake up the king to tell him in the middle of the night, right? There's something wrong here. There's something wrong about the relationship with the king and Haman, and neither of them are seeing it well. Okay? Neither of them are seeing it well, and Haman goes and he says, I'm gonna go. Now the king can't fall asleep. He asks them to read him from the memory book, right? Like, tell me what there was. They tell him the story of Mordechai. He hears someone in the garden. He says, who's there? Oh, it's Haman. Bring Haman in. Haman comes in. What's Haman doing there in the middle of the night? Right? There's like, this is weird, right? And he says, what should I do for someone that I love? Haman says, oh, clearly you're talking about me. Then what should we do? A horse that the king rode. No one ever rides a horse that the king rides. The clothes that the king wears. A crown that belongs to the king. And one of the highest ranking officers should bring him around and say, this is what is done for the person that the king loves. In other words, Haman is basically trying to usurp the kingdom, right? Like, he wants to become king. And Achashverosh says, okay, great, go take this and do this to Mordechai. He's done, right? He goes and it says he's taking Mordechai through the city, and he goes back home. It says, Nidchaf el beito avel v'chafui rosh. He goes into his house. He is mourning, and he is covered in and his head is covered with something. Okay, so the Midrash over here also says this is basically the end of Haman's plan, where he fails so miserably. Is he gets rid of Vashti. For what purpose? So his daughter will marry the king, so that he can become, right? So he can take over. He's now the king's father-in-law. He can take over, but the king marries Esther. So what does he do? Right? He goes in a different direction. He keeps on trying. How does he get his footing in the door? And he tells his family that he's going, I'm going to go tell the king and we're getting rid of Mordechai. And there's someone that's riding on the horse, and there's someone calling in front of him. Clearly my father is the one on the horse. This is the daughter of Haman, who says, clearly my father is the one on the horse, right? He succeeded in his plan, and Mordechai is pulling him, and she throws the garbage from the house onto his head, and then when she realizes it's her father, she jumps out and kills herself, and this is why he's also in mourning of the loss of his daughter, and he's also covered in garbage. So this is the Midrash. And then he comes back home, he tells him all of the miserable things that happened to him, and they come and they call him, they say, what are you doing? You're missing the meal. And he comes back to the meal. Now, here's where we see Esther's plan. Esther says, the king asks Esther, says, what can you do for you? And she says, please give me, right? Like, please give me my nation's life, right? Save them. And he says, who is asking to kill them? Who wants to destroy your nation? And she says, Haman. The king leaves the room, he comes back, and what does it say? Haman is on the queen's bed, right? He's begging for his life. He's crawling up onto the queen's bed. And the king loses it at that point and says, you're trying to take the queen while I'm still alive, right? And they hang him. Now, the way that this could have gone, right, by Esther's plan, is she could have taken Haman down with her, or she managed to get Haman to basically self-destruct himself. In all of these things, but all of this happens, why? Because she says that Mordechai is the one who saved the king's life. So then Mordechai is rewarded. Haman's plans become clear, and he's trying to take the queen in the palace, right? That's the last straw for the king. Now, from here and on is the war, right? Mordechai becomes the second in command. They manage to fight out. They manage to fight off all of the anti-Semites. You can't really change what the king says, but you can. You just write instead of, like it says, you can't change the king's decree. The king said, that all the Jews will be executed, right? Everybody can go and kill the Jews. What can be changed? Oh, Mordechai, the head of the Jewish people, is the second in command to the king, and he's going to be, and the army is behind him. So anyone who would like to come and attack the Jews is still more than welcome to. We can't change that law, but they're fighting back with the full force of the army, led by Mordechai. And Mordechai and Esther go out. They defeat everyone, and they make this into a holiday. They hang the 10 children of Haman, and there is the Vinahafach. Okay, so now let's go back to the important parts of the Megillah, and with this we'll finish. The mindset that a lot of Jews have is that Yom Kippur is the most important day of the year. And this is a misconception that just comes from the seriousness that we give to Yom Kippur. But what happens to all the other holidays? Yom Kippur, it says Kippurim, the kaf means like. It's like Purim. It's almost on the level of Purim. In other words, Purim is more important than Yom Kippur. What's so important about Yom Kippur? What's so important on Purim? What we talked about for Yom Kippur, we talked about this right for a few years, is that when you do tshuva, because there's judgment, and you did tshuva from yir'ah, from a place of fear, then what ends up happening is everything is forgiven, right? It's Yom Slicha. It is Yom Megillaht Avon, a day of forgiveness, a day of sorry, right? Like that is what Yom Kippur is. And that's an amazing, amazing thing. It's you have gotten your sins forgiven, you get a clean slate. However, Purim is Vinahafachu. Everything that you did, if you did tshuva from a place of love, which is the story of Purim, there's a complete switch around, then it's something that's like really, really deep, but it's avanotav nehefachim lezchuyot. Even your sins become as if they were mitzvahs. So how is this possible? This is what we mentioned beforehand with umi yodeh im le'et kazot higat lemalchut. Who knows if the whole reason that you are here is this one exact moment? Everybody has their own journey, good and bad. And everybody grows from it in their own way or fails trying, right? But in this movement that we have, I would not be here today without the bad things I did as well. It's not just the good things that you do. The fact that I had certain things that I was troubled with helped me work with people who had troubles that I was able to relate to, right? And I would not have been able to do that if I have not been through certain things myself, right? So the good and bad brings me to this moment. The idea of umi yodein le'et hazot higat lemalchut, who knows if the whole reason that you're here is for this exact moment, okay, is Hashem will find another way to rescue the Jews, right? Do not worry, right? Don't despair. Don't think, Esther, if you don't do this, this is the end of the nation. We'll be fine. Hashem will send someone else. You will be removed. Haman will find a way to remove you. There will be a different queen, and she'll do it. There will be some other diplomat or someone else that will find a way, and that's how things will happen. But your job now is everything you've been through, and just to think of what she's been through. She's taken from her home against her will. She gets raped by the king, right? Like this is not it is not all, oh, she's a queen, everything's wonderful, right? She is taken by force by the king. A king who killed his previous wife, right? This is not a pleasant situation to be in, even if you're a queen. And everything you've been through gives you an opportunity to save the nation. Figure that out. if we live our lives in this kind of mindset of every time you're in a room, every time you're in a situation, every time anything big is happening, and everything that we've been through and everything that we've suffered and everything good and bad that we've done, we stop and we say, maybe the entire purpose of my existence, let's go even further than that. Maybe all of the generations that came before us, we are the pinnacle of that, right? It just keeps on funneling down into us so that we could do this. Esther's parents, who knows what their story was? Her grandparents, who knows what their story was? They gave birth to Esther. That is now their legacy. So maybe all of the generations came down to this one moment that you have a chance to save everybody. Take your life very, very seriously, right? Think about the things that you do. And then good and bad brought you to here. That's v'nafachu. That's v'nafachu. It's even the bad things are mitzvahs. Even the bad things brought you to saving everyone. That's a mitzvah, right? There's an unbelievable thing over there. And Bezrat Hashem, we should have a wonderful, wonderful party.
Thank you.
Wow.
All right, and so we've got Thursday night.